Welcome, thanks for joining me, astrologer Patrick Arundell, for your in-depth weekly astrology overview for week commencing the 8th of April. And what a mighty week it is. I'm going to share on the screen shortly the event chart wheel for the week that we can all collectively relate to. But please stay with me. I'm going to go through each of the 12 zodiac signs from Aries through to Pisces that you can relate to in terms of your ascendant, the sun or the moon, to understand what this week holds for you in that regard. If you're new to my channel, thank you very much for joining us, because this is very much a community. If you're a returning visitor, thank you so much for all your views and interaction. If you've yet to subscribe to my channel, I'd be honoured if you did so now. Please click or tap on the bell notification symbol. Every time I drop a video, you should get an alert from YouTube. I'd just like to share with you about my free daily written horoscopes. You can subscribe underneath this video to get yours fired to your device each morning. I've been writing these for near to 30 years. I'm featured in one of Britain's most read daily newspapers and websites the world over. I also feature the primary influence of each day, so you can get an idea of the astrology as well as relate to your zodiac sign as well. Totally free of charge, and as I say, please click on the link beneath this video. I'm also a consultant astrologer. If you'd like to talk to me about a business or personal issue, please see my testimonials underneath this video too. These just come in. I don't in any way alter them. You can read quite freely what people have said about me. So on the screen now, I'm sharing the event chart at midnight on Monday. Now the big news is that later on Monday, we're going to have that total solar eclipse in Aries, which is going to be in conjunction with Chiron, an incredibly rare event. But as the day begins, the moon's not that far forwards in Aries. You can see it's just beyond Venus, newly arrived in Aries from the 5th of April. And the gap between them is very close, around about 4 degrees. So therefore, they are reinforcing each other. You may know that Venus in Aries is technically debilitated. This combination can give us a real desire to beautify our homes, the moon, because Venus can be very much to do with style and taste. So that's a lovely influence early in the day. But as the day goes on, for sure, the moon picks up speed along with the sun, and they're going to come into conjunction with Chiron. But I just want you to be mindful of the position of Mercury in Aries. It is in retrograde, and it's going to be so through to the 25th of April. But right at the start of this week, it's in a superb trine, which is very enabling with the part of fortune, right up there in Sagittarius. That suggests some good information can come to us through research, being open to the big picture, perhaps revisiting something that previously didn't quite work for us. That's how Mercury retrograde can help us. But the part of fortune is squared up by Neptune. So even if something looks promising, it's vital to get the detail, because Neptune can distort the reality. Now there's going to be 2 other really mighty planetary conjunctions this week beyond the sun meeting with Chiron. But let's look at that solar eclipse first. It's going to last for the next 6 months. Chiron in Aries is very much about our identity. In fact, all the planets in Aries, in a way, are to do with identity, because they're encouraging us to showcase what makes us individual, what makes us feel that we're very invested in the moment we're in. So it's a very urgent energy. And Chiron here, if you have it in your natal chart, of course it depends on what house it's in, but in house 1, very much to do with getting a clearer idea of what makes us unique. So many of us can be very hooked up into designer labels and brands. What Chiron is saying is, look, don't be fearful to be yourself. Also, it could propagate a talent within you to help someone else, to be some kind of coach or invigorator, because Chiron can be where we shine the most. It's just where we feel least heard. But this solar eclipse in Aries, because we've got such a lot of energy in Aries beyond the eclipse itself, is a huge opportunity to get into the moment. What's not to like? Well, it's the fact that Mars, the ruler of the sign of Aries, is afflicted this week in a big way. Mars is not particularly happy in the water sign of Pisces. Some astrologers would argue that, look, Mars is the traditional ruler of Scorpio, which is a water sign, so there is some mutual receptivity. I feel that Mars in Pisces can push us to get in touch with latent energies and subconscious issues that we may not have dealt with as well as we have thought we have. So it can be a very turbulent influence, 1 minute making us tearful, the next feeling quite frustrated because the water of Pisces is dulling the fire of Mars through its rulership of Aries. But of course, Saturn has been in Pisces since March 7th, 2023, so just over a year. And what Saturn's been doing during its time in Pisces is making us conscious of where we are in a huge pattern of time. That pattern of time started around about 28 years ago when Saturn moved into Aries. So it's coming to the end of its entire zodiacal journey. So before it moves into the sign of Aries, initially in 2025 for its first blush, it is pushing us really to work harder at the whole concept of feelings. So Mars comes along and already is perhaps feeling a little bit stirred up here, and the two come together on Wednesday exactly. Now, in traditional astrology, these two planets are known as the malefics. Mars is the lesser malefic and Saturn the greater malefic. So when they come together, it's almost like trying to drive the car with the handbrake on. It creates a lot of resistance. So as much as all this Aries energy is saying, let's be fresh, let's showcase our talents, let's be individual, let's get new plans off the ground, let's inject ongoing schemes that are important with greater vibrancy and passion, all that fire, along comes Saturn to really damp down on the ruler of Aries. So a truly critical clash between the malefics on Wednesday. So it's possible that a lot of simmering energy that's been working its way out of sight, deep in our psyches, could explode into the open in a most frustrated way. Now, people who have Mars conjunct Saturn can be very, very good at athletics and sports because they have the willpower, the Saturn staying power, and they have to focus that Mars energy very narrowly. But if they do encounter extra frustrations and obstacles, it can be very hard to handle and can lead to a lot of anger bursting out suddenly. So it is a very powerful influence. But however, on Thursday, the Sun, which has been inching forwards, meets the retreating Mercury. So we have a conjunction. This is known as an inferior conjunction because they come into GEMINI. Essentially, this is where, as we see it, Mercury sits in the disk of the Sun. The Sun radiates its energy in a magnifying, positive way into Mercury. But because Mercury is retrograde, what does this mean? Well, this is why I was saying to you, it's important that we understand that Mercury retrogrades are not just about snags, delays and frustrations. They are also about solving things. Perhaps things that we've been sort of getting by on. So if we've got a computer that keeps closing down and we've just turned it off, restarted it, crack on, but actually there's some fundamental mend that we can apply. Well, that's what a Mercury GEMINI in retrograde can create. So there may be something perhaps coming from Saturn's application to Mars that makes us slow down, think again, but we can still pick up pace by the end of this week because then Mars moves forwards away from Saturn and starts to forge an incredibly dynamic link to Jupiter. Now, Jupiter is the greater benefic. So we got the greater benefic collaborating with the lesser malefic. And they're going to come into an exactly perfect sextile on the 19th of April. So it just suggests the things that we have thought about carefully, that we are conscious of the emotional dynamic with, all that energy in Pisces, but where we can also apply ourselves in a very resolute, determined way through the Aries energy and the power of that solar eclipse. We can start to make progress again by the end of this week. But it's all about being integrated. If we take individual aspects in astrology and do a video on them, for example, but don't take a look at the bigger picture, we're actually not really understanding what's going on. And that's why it's important to use natal birth charts. So back on the screen now, you can see the week starts with Venus and the Moon in a sweet conjunction, but Mars and Saturn coming into a much more difficult one. By the end of Monday, the Sun applying to Chiron with the Moon in that total solar eclipse, the third supermoon in succession. We also have, you can see, Jupiter and Uranus inching closer together. They're going to come into that exact conjunction on the 21st. I will do a deep dive on that. It's the first time for 14 years. And they actually start this week, particularly in the case of Jupiter, in a pretty good link with Saturn as well. In fact, they've been in a close relationship since the start of the year. Saturn can be about restriction, but it can also push us to be very applied, determined, thorough and stoic, especially when things don't go particularly well. But it can be a good moderating influence to the excesses of Jupiter, which can sometimes promise more than it actually can deliver. So they've been helping each other all year, but by the 21st, Jupiter will come into that remarkable link with Uranus, but Mars in the sign of Pisces will move forwards to connect with both of them. So that's going to be a glorious alliance for us all to look forward to. But it just suggests when it comes to the material world, Taurus, our values, everyday money, we need to stay open-minded, progressive. We live in a fast-changing world. We can come up with all these new schemes with this Aries energy. We need to be aware of what our motive is, Pisces, and what the likely outcome can be manifested, Taurus. But the Aries energy is incredibly dynamic. But if we haven't really felt heard, or we haven't quite had the confidence to go for it as an individual, that's the big story of this week. Please stay with me as I go through each of the 12 zodiac signs from Aries through to Pisces. If you would like to ascend above the following zodiac forecast, if you give me 3 pieces of your personal birth data, of time, date and place, I can produce for you your life roadmap report. This will give you searing insights into the patterns that are played out in your life so far, but a much more intimate understanding of how they've impacted upon you and how you can work with them better future forwards. In my special package of 30% off, you can also get your 12 months transits, the moving planets in the sky interacting with your unique blueprint. Please see the link below for more. If you have taken advantage of that package before, why not check out my draconic version? That's your soul chart, your karmic chart. It can be very different from the natal chart. It's the roots of who we are. The natal chart is the fruit that comes from our efforts in this lifetime, but the draconic chart, very much what we bring into the world. Please see the link below about them too. Welcome Aries to your in-depth weekly forecast for week commencing the 8th of April for the ascendant, the sun or the moon. On the screen now, I'm showing the event chart for Monday at midnight. This is what we can expect overall through the next 7 days. The big takeout is that the moon in your sign is very close to Venus. If you are enjoying thinking about your appearance or making some changes at the moment, perhaps even to things at home, your instincts around the more decorative and artistic side of your situation are really enhanced by that combination. But also later on Monday, of course, there is that total solar eclipse in your sign, which is going to be in a conjunction with Chiron. Now, I don't know where Chiron is in your natal chart, but collectively, Chiron in Aries is very much about identity. You may have quite a healthy understanding of your strengths, but not all of us do. And even if we are pretty self-confident, there can be times when we do doubt ourselves. Chiron is an influence that's very much to do with where we sparkle. I think it is a little bit misrepresented at times, but it definitely can be where we don't feel heard. So if there are people around you who try to smother any individual talents you have, artistry or flair, or yeah, that's all right, this is a time over the next 6 months to really fiercely set your intentions about what makes you so special. And one of the things I love about Aries people is that if you get a gut feeling, you often go with it. Other zodiac signs can mull things over, almost like try to find all the angles of why not to do something when already you're gaining traction. But people criticize you because sometimes you then move on to something else which seizes your imagination. But someone has to start the process off, and we have to understand the symbolism of your sign. You are the first zodiac sign. So in the journey, the zoo, the movement of the animals, the zodiac, you're the ram, the one that has the passion, the drive, but also the confidence and courage to do something before it's perhaps being tested. So if there is something that you're attracted to at the moment that you feel excited about, haven't quite necessarily got all your proverbial ducks in a row, I feel the next 6 months can be a time when you really do up the ante, gain a lot of traction and get on the front foot. And essentially the combination of the sun and the moon, the third supermoon in succession, which is where the moon to us on Earth looks, it is physically closer to us, so it amplifies the moment. This is an opportunity for you to be much more self-assured, to get a firmer grip on your life direction, whatever the doubt is. But you know, the biggest doubter this week could still be you, because your ruler Mars is applying to Saturn. So back to that chart wheel, right at the start of the week, you can see there's only 2 degrees between them. But by Wednesday, they're in an exact alliance. This is known as a conjunction. So they're side by side. So that brings them into unity. But these 2 planets in traditional astrology, in the terms of Saturn, the greater, and of Mars, the lesser malefics. So they're known as being challenging. So when they come together in the 12th zodiac sign of your chart, that's very psychological. But the 12th house can also be the people who are not with us. So in traditional astrology, again, secret enemies. But the 12th house can also be where we withdraw. It can be where we don't feel 100% well, because Mars can be about physical thrust. Saturn applying to Mars could mean that at some level you don't feel your best this week. And of course, Mercury's in a retrograde in your sign, suggesting that some of the ideas you've had may have not quite flowed at the speed you want. Again, may have created some doubts. So this is a complex week, but we need to look at the big picture. And the big picture means that the total solar eclipse provides an influence for the next half year. But there may be some internal barriers you need to overcome in terms of self-limiting thinking, or perhaps if you're caught up quite a lot with the past, or there's someone who's disappointed you a lot around a relationship, or there's been a big loss of someone close to you and you're still processing that information. It's very hard to be energetic, dynamic, and powering forwards in the way that you're known when you're at your best. But you certainly have a chance to do that. I'd also like to take you back to that chart wheel and the position of Venus and its angle to Pluto. If you recall last week, when Venus moved into your sign on the 5th, it forged the first sextile between the two for over 220 years. Now they're still in contact, suggesting a very meaningful relationship could come into your life at this time. The 12th house can also be where things develop in our situations in a very subtle way, where someone may show an interest but not necessarily verbalize it. So watch out for someone's body language. Or is there somebody that actually you're drawn towards that you might not even like, but there's still something about them that intrigues you? So all those potentials could play out. But if you are building an alliance with a friend, with a family member, a neighbor, a colleague, or someone you really fancy, the chances are that Venus and Pluto is guiding you, because it's going to give you an instinctive understanding of where someone's coming from. Because with Mars, your ruler, afflicted this week, if there is anyone you're unsure of, who you may feel is a doubting Thomas, or someone who whispers behind their hands, is a little bit of a stirrer in your community or at work, Mars and Saturn are going to make you very aware of that. So this week in some ways is going to be a test of your self-belief, your self-worth. There could be doubters around. Some of that doubt can come from you. You may still be processing those old issues or losses, but if you can move into the moment, you really can start to apply yourself in the most fantastically powerful way over the next 6 months. It's been a real pleasure being with you, Aries. I hope you have a great week. Please like, share, comment, or subscribe. Welcome, Taurus, to your in-depth weekly forecast for week commencing the 8th of April for the Ascendant, the Sun, or the Moon. On the screen now is your event chart for midnight on Monday. This provides a backdrop for the whole week. We need to be mindful of your ruler Venus. It is in your 12th house, suggesting that you could be thinking very carefully about certain associations. 12th house Venus positions can make us reminisce about people from the past, feel very nostalgic, perhaps also rather sad if someone's gone out of our situation or a relationship isn't quite as bubbly as it once was. But Venus does forge a very dynamic link with Pluto. This began last week when Venus made its way into your 12th house on the 5th. You can see Pluto's right at the top of your chart, suggesting your link to the world at large is going to be transformed hugely over the next years. There is going to be a revision from the 2nd of September through to the 18th of November, when Pluto makes its way back into your sector of travel and widening your horizons. But essentially it's suggesting that your power can show itself professionally or in your local community or by voluntary or charitable contributions you make. But it's also possible that if you're doing things like this with Venus linking to Pluto in a subtle way, you may want to keep it a little bit quieter. Pluto in the 10th house is an interesting one. There's often a desire for greater recognition, but sometimes it's not complete, because Pluto likes to work sometimes beneath the surface. The 10th house is a very obvious position. So maybe you're reaching out to someone professionally, having some confidential discussions or taking soundings, which are important for your career, but it may take a little time to really work into reality. But you can also see that Venus is very close to the Moon in the 12th house. So if you are feeling nostalgic or thinking about someone who's no longer in your life, that wouldn't be a surprise. But of course, as the day goes on, the Moon moves forwards and connects with the Sun and Chiron in house 12. This comes with the total solar eclipse, the third supermoon in succession. That's where the Moon is physically bigger and closer to the Earth. And it suggests over the next 12 months, you could do a lot of inner work, because Chiron in the 12th house can be quite reflective. But of course, it's very psychological, the 12th house. Chiron can be where we shine. So if you are somebody, as I mentioned last week, who is involved in counseling, is a psychic, maybe even an astrologer, your delicacy is going to be really appreciated by the people you work with during this next half year. But if you have thought, for example, of going into business as an alternative therapist, for example, and converting a long-held hobby and interest into a business, the next few weeks are going to be very important to your progress, because this week also sees Mars, the ruler of Aries, in a tight collaboration with Saturn, the planet of limitation. That becomes exact on Wednesday. If there is a long-term goal you have, and you're doing all the research and preparing yourself with all this 12th house energy in Aries, it's really important that your plan is viable. And when Saturn meets with Mars on Wednesday, there could be a test. There could also be a test around a relationship, to be honest, because the 12th house can be where we discover when, sadly, people do not have our best interests at heart. And sometimes it can be really crushing to our sense of self if there is a feeling that someone's not as loyal as we would like, perhaps is not as committed, or perhaps not as sensitive if we're going through the mill in some way. And there could be an element of that for you this week, I'm afraid. But the good news is that by the end of this week, Mars moves forwards and forges an amazing link to Jupiter in your sign. Now that's within 3 degrees. That is going to become exact on the 19th of this month. And of course on the 21st, we have Jupiter and Uranus coming into a conjunction in your sign for the first time in 14 years, suggesting the more experimental things you've been working on in recent years, trying to change things up, can start to provide a payback to you. Mars is also going to support that event in a very dynamic way. So as much as some people may disappoint you and be fading out of your situation, there could be other players who come in who really are firmly in your corner. But essentially, this 12th house energy this week, which is going to go on for the next 6 months, is a lot about you deciding your spiritual, psychological and emotional direction in life. And if a hope you had isn't necessarily quite working, don't beat yourself up if you decide to have a change of plan, because remember, you've got Mercury in a retrograde also in house 12. So your thinking could therefore alter, because 12th house energy is very mutable. The great strength you have being a fixed sign is that when you apply yourself, it's generally in a very determined and long-term way. But this set of influences at the moment suggests that things are shifting, and it's shifting in a deep way. Perhaps there's certain elements of your nature, your shadow side, that you're going to become much more aware of. It just depends where we are in our personal development journey, because everybody may have experienced different things at different times. For example, like loss, some people don't lose their parents until they're quite late in their own lives. Other people will lose their parents when they're kids, which is a huge shock. So it's not, our lives are not divided on or determined only on what zodiac sign or ascendant we are or where our moon is. It's also to do with our experiences, our environmental experience. So it depends on where you are, but there's a huge opportunity here to get in touch with a part of your nature that you may not be completely familiar with. There may be some parts of yourself you don't even like, and that can be, again, an opportunity that this particular total solar eclipse linking with Chiron, the wounded healer, gives you the chance to embrace. It's been a real pleasure being with you, Taurus. Thank you so much for joining me. Have a great week, and please like, comment, share, or subscribe. Welcome, Gemini, to your in-depth weekly forecast for week commencing the 8th of April for the Ascendant, the Sun, or the Moon. On the screen now, I'm showing the event chart at midnight on Monday. This will provide a backdrop for the whole week. You can see that Mercury, your ruler, continues to be in retrograde, as it will be through to the 25th, but it is forging a terrific link to the part of fortune in your 7th house. So it could be you're going to connect to someone, Mercury in the 11th house, who could prove to be very lucky for you this week, despite the retrograde. There's also a lot of other influences in your 11th house, including Venus. Venus continues its alliance with Pluto. It's possible that you are building up an awareness to someone or a group of people or even a belief which has proven to be quite profound for you. When Pluto and Venus are connecting positively, we certainly want to feel things in a very, very deep way. So that's encouraging as well. But later on Monday, we have a total solar eclipse, which sees the sun move forwards along with the moon, and they're both going to connect in an exact conjunction with Chiron, the so-called wounded healer. And this third successive supermoon, where the moon appears physically larger because it's closer to us, is going to give you an opportunity over the next 6 months to be very dynamic around your connections. Now, you are someone who can get along with lots of different types of people, but 11th house energy suggests you're going to be refining the people you want to spend time with. You want to be with people who really share your ideals or are great fun to be with. But Chiron can be where we feel a wound, but it can also be where we shine. Now, in the sign of Aries, it's very much about identity. In the 11th house, if there are some people in your friendship circle that don't quite align with you, those people could make way. New people could be coming in. It may even be around your professional situation that a big shift is set to occur, and that can happen this week. And it's not because of the total solar eclipse. It's because the ruler of the sign of Aries, Mars, you can see right at the top of your chart in the 10th house, very close to Saturn. These are known as the greater and lesser malefics. They come into an exact conjunction on Wednesday, and that's going to be a time when your authority, which has been boosted by Mars since March the 23rd, when it moved into Pisces, could be tested. And maybe it is to do with someone taking your goodwill, your friendliness for granted, and you may feel that you're going to have to respond in a very assertive way. And if that's what's required, then that's what you will do. On Thursday, we have a GEMINI with your ruler Mercury. Now, this is known as an inferior conjunction because the reverse in Mercury is this side of the sun. When Mercury is direct, it's the other side of the sun. But the sun amplifies the power of Mercury. So the radiation of the sun's essence on Mercury is very strong. So if you do rethink something, or somebody does disappoint you a little bit, and you do decide to move towards new people or a new direction, this could be quite fluid. But by the end of the week, Mars actually moves forwards and starts to link up. Not exactly, but gets into a stronger relationship with Jupiter. That's going to become exact on the 19th. So all you're doing professionally, perhaps sometimes behind the scenes, perhaps there's been a lot of knowledge and information you've been downloading over the last 5 or 6 years with Uranus in your 12th house. Maybe at times it's been quite hard in terms of your nervous system. May have been churned up. It may have been more difficult to sleep. Your adrenals just turned up to max at times, but it will all start to make sense by the 21st of April when Jupiter and Uranus meet for the first time in 14 years, but Mars is still there. So you've got a mixture of your passion, determination and confidence, Mars, with the energy of Jupiter and Uranus, the knowledge, perhaps spiritual knowledge and insights you've gained over the last 5 or 6 years will really start to crest in a way which can be truly meaningful for you. So this is a week when friendships, connections to others, your long-term future, your social circle, very much under the astral microscope. There can be a stroke of luck, but also you may meet some opposition, particularly professionally, or it may be outside of work, where you just encounter someone who has a kind of might is right attitude, which really aggravates you, and you decide to push back. So there could be a battle of wills at the heart of this week, but your ruler, in its combination with the sun in the cazimi, can give you the quick wits and the flex, which is an innate part of you, but maximize those despite the retrograde in order to come out of this situation in a way which is right for you. But it may mean flexing again. This may see you reorientate your future direction in a bit of a different way, but it will be a way that ultimately is better for you in the long term. It's been a real pleasure being with you, Gemini. Have a great week. And I'd be grateful if you would like, comment, share or subscribe. Cancer, to your in-depth weekly forecast for week commencing the 8th of April for the Ascendant, the Sun or the Moon. On the screen now, I'm showing the event chart at midnight on Monday, which provides a backdrop for the whole week. Now we need to be mindful of your ruler, the Moon. And you can see the Moon is in house 10, so the chances are your feelings are going to be closer to the surface this week. It's not just because of the total solar eclipse, which occurs later on Monday, and you can see that the Moon's very close to Venus, so that's a delightful combination. If you are someone who's a caregiver, a grandparent, a parent, your more nurturing and protective energies will be very much to the fore. But other big standouts from this chart. Well, Pluto, which moved into house 8 on the 21st of January, continues to forge a brilliant link to Venus. So if your instincts are more entrepreneurial and towards business, that's a very strong alliance. And it could be that an association or connection you have with someone else is going to be very beneficial for you. But your leadership skills can definitely be showcased later on Monday because, of course, we have that total solar eclipse in Aries, but it's combining with Chiron. If you are someone who's had a gift, and it's often the case with Cancer people, of management, of encouraging people, giving people guidance, or being a leader of some kind, as I mentioned, this is very much part of your celestial DNA. That part of your nature is going to be elevated to an even greater high over this next half year. The issue, however, is that you may not feel that you have had the necessary acknowledgement, respect, or appreciation from the people you've helped. Or that could be part of the story that you may experience over this next 6 months. But that doesn't mean to say you shouldn't go for it. Now, I know that Mercury is in retrograde in your 10th house. This is very much to do with goals and ambitions and success. And for sure, maybe you are rethinking some of the things you had thought you were going to go for. So things can be a little bit shifting. But despite this, Mercury does forge a very strong link to the part of fortune. So the part of fortune can be the part of a horoscope where we have some kind of breakthrough. And this one is in your 6th house. So that could be the processes, the details that you have a grip on can be very important in terms of your ability to elevate your standing, impress a boss, do a presentation that grabs the attention of a potential client. But with Mercury in that retrograde, it is possible that something may just need to stay a little bit flexible. The other thing to tell you about is Mars, because Mars moved into a very adventurous part of your situation on the 23rd of March. And since then, your desire to break out, be more spontaneous, has probably been strong. But if you do want to shake things up in terms of your life role, Mars's connection with Saturn on Wednesday of this week could create some frustration. It's as if you're trying to drive somewhere but with the handbrake on. So even if you're straining every sinew in order to improve your situation, it may feel that things are going very slowly. Just be assured that by the end of this week, Mars actually starts to link up with Jupiter, the planet of growth, which is in an amazing part of your chart, and that will become exact on the 19th. Now, you may recall that Jupiter and Uranus are going to come into an exact conjunction on the 21st of April. Mars will be in that as well, in a sextile to them. So the ideas that you've been generating since the 23rd of March are not lost. They're going through a proofing period. So it's possible information that you had been basing some of your goals and expectations upon has been faulty. Perhaps there has been frustrations around a mode of transport that's proved unreliable. Perhaps your internet connection hasn't been great. If you have been traveling somewhere to do with your work, or you do this week, it might not necessarily be an easy trip. But the resistance that you meet requires a response. And on Thursday, as Mercury meets with the Sun, the retreating Mercury, we have a GEMINI. So something that you had set your sights on may need to flex a little bit, but once you've accepted that, then you can go again. And by the end of this week, as I mentioned, Mars is very supportive to you. So the total solar eclipse and the fact that Venus and the Moon are together at the start of this week, and Pluto supportive to Venus, and the fact that Mercury in its retrograde fortune is a great link to the part of fortune, suggests you can show more determination and you can thrust forwards over the next half year towards some significant goals. But it just may be that this week you do need to check out that if you're being inhibited in any way because you don't feel celebrated, and if you're aware of that, and that of course can be very disappointing, it doesn't change the fact that your gift to help people is still very strong. So with Chiron, we need to celebrate the gift as much as grieve what we don't get. And the overall big picture of your chart, particularly with Jupiter and Uranus, in terms of your longer term future, as long as you're open to fresh approaches, is very, very dynamic indeed. It's been a real pleasure being with you, Cancer. Thank you so much for joining me. Have a great week, and please like, comment, share, or subscribe. Leo, to your in-depth weekly forecast for week commencing the 8th of April for the Ascendant, the Sun, or the Moon. On the screen now, I'm showing the event chart for midnight on Monday. This provides a backdrop energy for the whole of the week, but I am going to share with you the important planetary alliances as the week unfolds. So you can see there's a big cluster of energy in House 9. This is your sister fire sign of Aries, where the solar eclipse will occur later on Monday. But I just want to draw your attention to the position of Venus. Very close by is the Moon. So as you go into this new week, I feel there is a sense that change can be as good as a rest. But because Pluto continues to forge such a powerful link with Venus, which you recall first occurred on the 5th when Venus moved into Aries, that's still going to be very important to you this week. And I think essentially what you're trying to do is understand the truth of certain associations. Now that could be people you're already involved with, whether it's colleagues, friends, family members, neighbours, or someone more personally, or it could be someone that you are going to meet this week. But this part of your situation is definitely very powerful at the moment. Now, of course, later on Monday, we have that eclipse, but we do have Mercury in a retrograde in the same sector, and that's forging a very strong link to the part of fortune in your sister fire sign of Sagittarius. So your fire triplicity is really very strong, and if your sun or your ascendant is later to the end of the sign of Leo, that's very dramatic, and it's going to give you an extra sense of excitement as this week begins. But Mercury's retrograde does mean there could be some snags around agreements, contracts, travel. Anything to do with technology also may need revisiting. But what the part of fortune suggests is your enthusiasm, your warmth, which is a big part of your being, is going to be a real asset to you. What I would say, however, is that Neptune forges a square with the part of fortune, and Neptune's in the part of your situation where you're much more invested. This could be in a business context, could be emotionally. So even if there is something that seems very bright, really getting through to the nub of the information is critical, because Neptune can distort our take in quite subtle but powerful ways. Now you can also see that Saturn and Mars are very close together in house 8. If you are feeling that you're up against it a little bit in terms of your long-term finances, savings, paying for the mortgage, perhaps putting money away for a pension, that pressure can intensify by the middle of this week, but I will discuss that once we have a look at that total solar eclipse. So by the latter part of Monday, the moon and the sun have moved forwards to connect with Chiron. Chiron is often where we're going to sparkle and help people the most. It's definitely a great influence for that, but it can also be where we feel valueless in some ways, or we don't feel heard or seen, or we don't get much acknowledgement. The ninth house is about our philosophies, but our higher truth. If you feel that people generally don't necessarily believe you, or don't take your expression of ideas very seriously, or even if you did get an academic qualification when you were younger, it hasn't really changed how you feel about yourself, or did you not go for one because someone was telling you, well look, you're never going to be smart enough to get this. That's the kind of flavour of Chiron in house 9, but in the sign of Aries it's very much about our identity. The ninth house is about being free. If you do feel penned into a particular way of being because of the influences of your parents when you were younger, or because your nature is a little bit more conservative, the dramatic influences all cresting in your ninth house as this week begins is encouraging you with the solar eclipse over the next 6 months to break free, to liberate yourself from some of those limiting ways of thinking and being that may have been invested in you. The more dramatic part of life is therefore emphasized, because staying as you are may not see you reap the greatest reward. So change really could be part of that process, and having the confidence to try different things, experiment, knowing that not everything will necessarily pay off, is part of the journey that you're on. But by the middle of the week, Mars has moved forwards and it's applying to Saturn, one of astrology's most challenging planetary influences. So if you are trying to raise money for a business idea, or for a property purchase, you're really going to have everything dialed in. So the more that you anticipate the information that's going to be required, for example, a good business plan, the more that's going to convince someone who could scrutinize you quite strongly and help to reassure them of your proficiency. But the eighth house can also be about intimacy. And Mars, of course, can be about sex. And if your love life isn't very hot at the moment, perhaps because you're not seeing somebody, or perhaps in an ongoing relationship things have cooled off between you, use the ninth house energy in Aries to try to reimagine your approach. And that may mean taking the lead and surprising a partner by being fresh and spontaneous, doing things off the cuff more. So that's a good way to approach things if you are involved, but it has got a little stale. If you'd like to meet someone, I feel it's really important, if you do have a date this week, that you ask some searching questions about them, because by Thursday, the retreating Mercury meets the advancing Sun in a Mercury cazimi. We have about 6 of these a year. In the retrograde, that's known as an inferior conjunction. That's because the position of Mercury is this side of the Sun, but the Sun still amplifies and warms up the quick wits of Mercury. And in the ninth house, it's very much about the big picture, downloading knowledge and information. So even though Mercury is retrograde, I feel that what you can gain through the snags that might be coming up is a fresh perspective on a situation. And that fresh perspective can really actually be extremely valuable. And by the end of this week, Mars moves forwards away from Saturn and starts to link with the planet of expansion, Jupiter, in a very exciting way, which will link perfectly on the 19th. And because Jupiter and Uranus themselves come together on the 21st in your sector of success, trying fresh approaches, being innovative is where it's at the moment for you. But I feel key relationships within that, because of the role of Pluto and Venus at the start of this week, is really important. So it's not necessarily just being motivated for your own outcomes. I feel that you're wanting something bigger than that. You're wanting a meaning in your life, but you're wanting to shake it up, and you're wanting to add a little bit of dash and flair, but that may mean pushing yourself outside your comfort zone. It's been a real pleasure being with you, Leo. I hope you have a great week, and if you've yet to do so, please do subscribe, comment, like or share. Virgo, it's your in-depth weekly forecast for week commencing the 8th of April for the Ascendant, the Sun or the Moon. On the screen now, I'm sharing the event chart for midnight on Monday, which provides a backdrop for the whole week. We need to be mindful of your ruler, Mercury. And Mercury continues its retrograde through to the 25th, but it does forge a very positive link to the part of fortune. Now, Mercury's in the part of your chart to do with where you're most invested, but that can be in a practical and physical and financial way, but also emotionally. And it forges a lovely link with the part of fortune. There could be a chat you have this week with someone which could surprise you in terms of their understanding of your situation or how deeply you feel about something. But also at the start of this week, Venus continues just into your 8th house, where it can attract good fortune to you financially, or someone close to you can have some kind of uplift, but be generous to you. But that's forging, just like last week, a super link to Pluto. Maybe you can move your resources around and just squeeze a little bit more from them by doing things in a slightly different way. You are someone with a great gift for looking at the detail of things. So there may be something that if you look again, you can squeeze a bit more from it. Now the moon's very close to Venus at the start of this week, which could give you a longing for a deep connection, especially if you're not in one. But as the day goes on, so the moon and the sun step forwards and meet with Chiron. Chiron in the 8th house is quite complex. It could be an influence where we have a gift to assist people in understanding their finance. So many financial advisors will have Chiron in the 8th house. Maybe bankers, people like that too. However, it can be where we feel we don't get much back from other people. And in the sign of Aries, it's very much about our identity. So if you feel your life lacks really close connections with people, that could be the thing that you're mournful of through this total solar eclipse, which is the 3rd supermoon in succession. And that event, which occurs on Monday, is going to provide a backdrop for the next 6 months. So it's very powerful. But the 8th house can be about transformations of all kinds. It can also be to do with healing. If there is something of a psychological or a physical ailment that has been in some ways a little bit stuck, you may find that something can shift during this period of time. And one of the great ways for that to happen is through new information. Jupiter can be about information, also philosophies. It's in your 9th house, and it's suggesting that a connection to overseas or to someone who has a very wide perspective of life can be very fortunate for you, particularly by the 21st of this month as the two meet. But Mars in your sector of relating is going to be very supportive to that conjunction between Jupiter and Uranus, and actually later this week forges a great angle to Jupiter already. Yet it is in a conjunction with Saturn this week. They're within 2 degrees as the week begins, but that becomes exact on Wednesday. If there is someone that you're dealing with who's been very, very difficult to deal with, perhaps very stubborn and unyielding and unbending, and you've been trying your best to see their point of view, lean into their needs, respond to their perspective, and you're still getting nothing back, you may find by Wednesday that you are going to react in a very firm way. But you know, even if you do, by Thursday, and the GEMINI featuring your ruler Mercury, that actually, despite Mercury's retrograde, could see something then move forward. So maybe there is a big discussion that you need to have. Maybe you need to be more combative in your approach. It could be with a line manager, it could be with a colleague who's taken you for granted. But now is the time to really front up on your boundaries. So Saturn's been encouraging you to do this for the last year. You may have experienced some cool responses from various people during that time. Now it's time for you to find your voice and really be very strong-willed if someone isn't being reasonable with you. But that Mercury GEMINI, despite the retrograde on Thursday, can then see you use your powers of perception and discrimination, where you get into the detail and sift through what's really relevant and get to what's important to you, and that can give you an outcome that pleases you. And as I mentioned, Mars then moves forwards, escapes the more limiting energy of Saturn, but picks up in a great angle with Jupiter. So this week is going to be interesting. I think there could be some very important discussions, very important inner thoughts that you have. It can be a week of evolution, and through that evolution it may feel a bit uncomfortable, but it's really, really an important week and an important next 6 months for you to move forwards and evolve in a way which really feels that your life has a deeper meaning to it. It's not just going through the processes. You need to feel that you're experiencing things, and sometimes the best way to do that is through overcoming challenges, whether it's in relationships, a business situation, with our work. By coming through those challenges, it can help us grow, and that's the big opportunity for you this week. It's been a real pleasure being with you, Virgo. Thank you so much for joining me. Have a great week, and if you've yet to do so, please like, comment, share or subscribe. Welcome Libra to your in-depth weekly forecast for week commencing the 8th of April for the Ascendant, the Sun or the Moon. On the screen now I'm sharing your event chart, which provides a backdrop for the whole week. This shows your ruler Venus very close to the Moon as the week begins. This combination is really delightful. Your natural talent for connecting to people or reading people's relationship responses is enhanced by that, undoubtedly. But you do have Mercury in a retrograde in your sector of relating still, so there could be some crosswires still this week, but it is forging a fine link to the path of fortune. This is a significant marker in an astrology chart. It shows where you will shine this week. So your quick wits and ability to frame your ideas despite Mercury's retrograde is strengthened. Whether people will hear you as you want them to is another matter. Now, as Monday develops, the Moon moves forwards, as does the Sun, and they both connect to Chiron. Chiron in the sign of Aries is very much about identity. You have a gift for relating to people, but then if you don't feel seen or heard or respected, it can leave you feeling a little bit empty. So what Chiron in Aries, together with this total solar eclipse, which is the third supermoon in succession, is urging you to do over the next 6 months is get that tipping point between what you give and get, just that more attuned to what's good for you. And one of the reasons that this week gives you an opportunity to do that, Libra, is that you will see that Mars, which moved into your sector of physicality on the 23rd of March and has probably given you a boost when it comes to being a bit more robust and having more stamina, that's going to meet up with Saturn on Wednesday. Now, these two planets, Mars the lesser and Saturn the greater malefics, So in traditional astrology, they weren't seen as being so lucky. Now, Mars, of course, can be about wars, aggression, impatience, our sexual energy. Saturn can be about structures, but it also, when it is applying to a faster moving planet, is like an obstacle. And one of the things that's going to happen this week is that I feel on the back of that total solar eclipse, the energy you put into all sorts of relationships, it doesn't have to be with a partner, it could be with a family member, it could be with a colleague, a neighbour, a friend. The energy you put in, if someone really isn't seeing you, Chiron makes you that much more sensitive, but Mars and Saturn are going to make you that much more outspoken. It's a very abrasive combination, especially in the 6th house, because that's about details. And it could be at work where someone's a bit picky or irritable or doesn't recognise just how much application you're putting in, and that could really seriously annoy you. Because what can happen with Mars in Pisces is that energy that's been stored away a long time can erupt to the surface, but when it does, it can do so unexpectedly. So just be aware if something isn't quite as you want, whereas normally you may lean into the situation, see both sides of the story, acknowledge to the other person where they're coming from, understand totally that it wasn't all their fault, it's just one of these things. They may see a different side of your nature this week, because that combination is just going to give you an edge. But you know, it's an edge that can be good, because one of the things about being a people pleaser is that actually people then take us for granted. So sometimes we do have to reinforce our boundaries. So if you need to be more outspoken and a bit grittier at the heart of this week, don't be guilty about it, because over the next 6 months, Chiron, with that total solar eclipse, is encouraging you to rebirth your approach to relating in general, so that you're getting more enrichment from it. So the traffic between give and take is more balanced, and that's really the nub of this week. Now, as the week goes on, Thursday we have a Mercury cazimi. So that retreating Mercury meets the advancing Sun. This is called an inferior conjunction because Mercury is retrograde, and this side of the Sun, when it's not retrograde, it's called a superior conjunction. But the Sun still radiates its magic into Mercury, because Mercury sat in the heart of the Sun, which is what cazimi means. So that skill that you have around relating could be strengthened, but only if you feel that other people are taking your viewpoint seriously. By the end of the week, however, that Mars is moved forwards, and it's heading towards an absolutely exquisite relationship with Jupiter and Uranus, which becomes exact around about the 19th. But it's going to be involved in that conjunction on the 21st between those two, the first for 14 years. Now they're in the part of your situation to do with investment, devotion in a more romantic way, but investment or business ideas that maybe show flair and innovation, Uranus, but also help you to grow your resources. So an idea you've got that you're presenting, you can do so with a lot of physical energy and enthusiasm as this month reaches that point around about the 19th to the 21st. But just be aware that the Sun moves on the 19th into Taurus to join up with Jupiter and Uranus as well. And that's the part of the year when it goes from a discussion, the 7th house, to really finding out and decoding where people really are with you. So it's going to be a big shift at the end of this month, and the Sun will square up with Pluto then, as will Venus on the 29th. So could be quite a complex end to the month if you feel that people are not acknowledging your creative talent and flair. Pluto in the 5th house. But this week, overwhelmingly, does give you an opportunity to skillfully relate, as usual, but it's really wanting you to get from others what you truly deserve. And if you're not, you could be a lot grittier in your response, with that application of Mars to Saturn. And as I said, it's probably not the best of weeks to be trying to push yourself too hard, either at work or in the gym or any thing that you're doing to try to be virtuous. Try to measure that out because Saturn can be limiting. It's been a real pleasure being with you, Libra. Have a great week. If you've yet to do so, please like, comment, share or subscribe. Scorpio, it's your in-depth weekly forecast for week commencing the 8th of April for the ascendant, the sun or the moon. On the screen now, I'm showing the event chart for the start of the week. This provides a backdrop for all 7 days. The big takeout is all the energy in house 6, including the retrograding Mercury, but you also have the moon in this location and it's just passed over Venus. The 6th house is where we get it all together in terms of life structure. So it's the details. It's not necessarily tremendously exciting, but if we get all those details working sweetly, then everything runs that much more smoothly. But having the moon very close to Venus suggests that we can bring some flair to the equation. But if you recall last week when Venus moved into the sign of Aries, it forged a sextile to Pluto. And Pluto is your modern ruler. And on the screen now, you can see it's right at the bottom of your chart. So it's suggesting since the 21st of January, and maybe for 11 weeks last year, that you're going through some very profound changes in terms of how you feel about life, your connection to people you're close to, such as your family or your extended family. It could be a desire to move somewhere different or renovate where you live, because Pluto can be to do with the Phoenix rising. So any kind of restoration fits with Pluto here. But its angle with Venus is still intact as this week begins. So if you can take a practical approach to what your emotional needs are, perhaps by creating more space or tidying up, decluttering, that's going to be a good thing to do. But of course, later on Monday, we do have the total solar eclipse. The moon and the sun move forwards from midnight and connect with Chiron. Chiron in Aries is very much about where we have our sense of identity. But the 6th house is often to do with work and where we're helping others, providing services. Over the next 6 months, you need to feel that you're valued. So if you're in a job where you just feel that you're a number and not validated very strongly, there could be a big change set to come your way. Now, of course, your traditional ruler of Mars is very much about passion. And it can, in the 5th house, be to do with creativity. And since it moved into your 5th house on the 23rd of March, you probably have felt a lot more sociable. But this week, it comes into a very tense conjunction with Saturn, the planet of restriction. And you can see from the wheel, they're pretty close together on Monday. So the tension can be there all week. So if you want to express yourself, but somehow your physical world is not very receptive or not very able for that, or you have a job that's a bit dull, then that could leave you feeling very uptight. But the total solar eclipse later on Monday suggests you can rebirth your approach to your work, your life structures. You know, is this a time when you can reorder things in some ways? And that will create more space for you to express yourself. Your relationship sector is very strong with Jupiter and Uranus closer in conjunction, which becomes exact on the 21st. By the end of this week, Mars moves past Saturn and connects in a sextile to Jupiter, which can give you a sense of excitement. So there may be a conversation or some dialogue you need to have at the heart of this week when maybe a tricky subject does need to be discussed. One of them just really could be is if you feel somewhat taken for granted. Now, at home, it may be because you're doing too many of the domestic chores. At work, it could be because colleagues think, well, you always do something that is not necessarily the most exciting role and you don't tend to moan about it. But they could be in for a surprise because at the heart of this week, you could find your voice in a much more direct way. And of course, when you do express yourself when you're frustrated, you can really get to the heart of a matter in a very cutting way, and that can surprise people. But Mercury combines with the Sun on Thursday in a GEMINI. And maybe the detail that you're going to bring up could surprise them, but you may also come up with some kind of suggestion which can make things better. Because the sixth house, even if it isn't the most dashing part of the zodiac, it is an area that's fundamentally very important, because if we don't have punctuality, if we don't have attention to detail, if we don't have a schedule, if things aren't ordered, then everything would just fall over. It can't just be off the cuff all the time. So we do need to have some kind of calibration and a setup that works. So that's the part of your life that maybe you're needing to refine at the moment. It's not perhaps quite working as you want. You could express your frustration in a big way at the heart of this week, but by the end of the week, some kind of solution will be evolving for you, which will delight you. It's been a real pleasure being with you, Scorpio. I hope you have a great week. If you've yet to do so, please like, comment, share, or subscribe. Welcome, Sagittarius, to your in-depth weekly forecast for week commencing the 8th of April for the Ascendant, the Sun, or the Moon. On the screen now, I'm showing the event chart at the start of the week, which will provide a backdrop. You can see that the path of fortune is at 26 degrees and 55 minutes in your sign. So that means if you show or take the initiative around the situation, it's linked to Mercury, despite Mercury's retrograde, can be very positive. So there's an idea that you've got that you can showcase in a very persuasive way. Now, last week, Venus, the planet of love, but also loot, moved into your 5th house. That's very sociable. It can be very affectionate. And at the start of this week, the moon is very close to Venus. That's a really lovely combination. So if there is someone, whether it's a partner, someone you're interested in, even your children that you're really enjoying at the moment, that can be turned up to max. What's more challenging this week, to be honest, Sagittarius, is the role of Saturn. Over the last year, just over a year, Saturn has been in your sector of emotion. And maybe something to do with a property matter or family pressures have been a factor since then. But Mars moved into that area on the 23rd of March. And you may have shown a lot of determination to overcome those challenges. But this week they are going to be coming into an exact conjunction. And that can cause some frustrations to really peak. But of course on Monday we have the total solar eclipse in the most bubbly part of your situation, house 5. And of course Mercury, like I mentioned, is in a retrograde here, but as the day goes on, Venus and the Sun move forwards and connect with Chiron. Chiron in the 5th house could be a sense that if you don't feel completely fulfilled in your romantic life, or you'd like to be more creative and imaginative at work, that's an area you could work on over the next 6 months of the eclipse influence. But also the sign of Aries can be very much about our identity. You are usually someone who needs to feel that your free-spiritedness can be expressed. And if that is being inhibited at the moment, particularly around those home and family pressures, that's something you'll want to work on through this next half year. But by Wednesday, Mars has moved forwards and connects in an exact conjunction with Saturn. And if you do feel hemmed in, the pressure of that could feel really challenging. What I would say to you is by the end of this week, Mars moves past Saturn and starts to link up in a much more positive way with your ruling planet of Jupiter. Now, Jupiter and Uranus continue their journey in your 6th house. Taking different approaches to the type of work you could do or the way you organise your home life is going to pay dividends for you, and you're going to see the evidence of that by the 21st of this month. But of course, Mercury does continue that retrograde in your 5th house. So however much the total solar eclipse can help you to showcase your talents over the next 6 months, Mercury suggests there may be some slight amendments that still need to be made. Try to take these in your stride. What I feel is going to be most challenging this week is if you don't feel heard in terms of your emotional situation, or you feel in some ways a little bit inhibited by some of your feelings. Because you can be such an optimistic, outgoing and bubbly person, just allow yourself to have feelings, because that's perfectly natural. And if you deny them, what can happen is they build up and then they express themselves in a way that we don't feel comfortable with. And that could be that conjunction between Mars and Saturn. But if you want to change something physically in your home life, that combination will give you a lot of determination to do it. You know, whether it's getting some decorating done, whether it's applying to get a rental on an apartment, whether it's getting your first foot on the property ladder in terms of a purchase, your willpower will be awesome, but you will feel potentially a little bit closed in by that, and the more playful, expressive energy of the 5th house may not shine quite as brightly as you may like. But by the end of this week, you will see things start to move, and what can help this is the Mercury cazimi on Thursday. The retreating Mercury meets the advancing Sun, and that can help you to really rethink some of the creative and expressive ideas you have, but find a way of outputting them that's just that much more suitable to you. It's been a real pleasure being with you, Sagittarius. I hope you have a great week. If you've yet to do so, please like, comment, share or subscribe. Welcome Capricorn to your in-depth weekly forecast for week commencing the 8th of April for the Ascendant, the Sun or the Moon. On the screen now, I'm showing the event chart, which provides a backdrop for the whole 7 days. The big takeout is that your ruling planet Saturn has Mars applying to it. It's only 2 degrees away as this week begins. What this suggests, despite the total solar eclipse of Monday, which does occur in a very sensitive area, is that you are going to be more pointed in the way you express your ideas. Now, maybe something's been bubbling up for some while, Capricorn. And Mercury, the planet of communication, has of course been in a very tender area for some while. In retrograde, it does actually forge a very fine link at the start of this week with the part of fortune. The part of fortune is the part of this chart that suggests some fortune can come to you by embracing its energies, and it's in the 12th house. So that's saying if you get an instinctive feeling that you feel needs to be expressed, Mercury, despite Mercury's retrograde, Saturn, as it's met by Mars on Wednesday, gives you the platform to punch that across in a very direct way. However, Wednesday is not a great day if you're traveling anywhere and you rush the journey. Now, I know with Mercury retrograde, transport systems do tend to get affected, and if you're running late for an appointment or there's a lot of traffic when you're trying to get somewhere, however annoying that may be, don't try to push too hard, because what Saturn can do to Mars is restrict it. In fact, all through this week, do try to pace yourself. You're likely going to get exasperated at times this week. You're going to feel more sensitive than usual. People see you as being very pragmatic. They can absolutely rely upon you. You're hardworking. You take responsibility. You're reliable. Those are all great qualities. But the moon, which is how we feel about things, doesn't work quite so well in your sign. So there could be part of your conditioning which means that you don't accept feelings quite as easily as other people, because for you it's very important to project an appearance of capability, of coping, of not being too affected by situations. But you mustn't see that as weakness, because Monday's total solar eclipse is conjunct with Chiron, and Chiron in the 4th house is very, very powerful. If you didn't feel heard when you were younger, you weren't nurtured, there wasn't a very sensitive environment or very encouraging environment, you could become much more conscious of that over the next half year. But maybe what will happen with Mars applying to Saturn this week is that you're going to tell someone that you're not very happy with the way they're being. But by doing that, you may need to reveal how their behaviour is impacting upon you. And that may, in some ways, make you fearful in terms of your pride. But just remember that the sparkling alliance between Jupiter and Uranus is in the 5th house. The 5th house is chance, can be to do with risk and speculation. But these two are going to come back to you spectacularly well by the 21st of this month. And by the end of this week, Mars has gone beyond Saturn and starts to reach towards Jupiter in a very enabling sextile. Now, Mars will also be involved in the conjunction between Jupiter and Uranus on the 21st. In fact, it starts to link with them beautifully on the 19th. So you are going to find your voice again in a very enthusiastic and motivated way. But this week, there could be some tension around anyone who is insensitive around you, takes you for granted, doesn't understand that you do have feelings, however much you just crack on and deal with life, you're going to be much more inclined to tell it how it is. But that's not a bad thing. So don't in any way feel that that's not your right to do. Also, another thing that can be a feature of this week, Capricorn, is if you're really keen on home decoration at the moment, don't be surprised if you want to get some paint charts and some sample pots, or actually get stuck in and make it happen. But if you are travelling anywhere this week, with that combination between Mars and Saturn, or if you go into the gym, if things do get snarled up in traffic, if you're a bit late, don't push too hard. In general, understand the 3rd house is your nervous system. It can be short journeys, can be connections with neighbours, siblings, community. And I feel that you are going to feel more sensitive, and there could be a more reactive, perhaps defensive stance from you, but that's not a bad thing. But I wouldn't rush around anywhere this week for sure. It's been a real pleasure being with you. I hope you have a great week. And if you've yet to do so, please like, comment, share or subscribe. Welcome Aquarius to your in-depth weekly forecast for week commencing the 8th of April for the Ascendant, the Sun or the Moon. On the screen now, you can see the event chart right at the start of the week. This is going to provide a backdrop for the whole 7 days. Now, I'm going to also share with you the moving parts of the week because, of course, it's a mighty week with that total solar eclipse later on Monday. But at the very start of the week, we need to be mindful of Pluto because that's the planet in your sign. And it's just into your 1st house. So it's really pushing you, and it has been since the 21st of January and for 11 weeks last year, to reinvent your personal identity in some way. But last week, as Venus, the planet of charm, moved into your 3rd house, which is about quick sharing of ideas, those two retain a connection as you go into this new week. So you must have maximum self-belief in what you're saying to people and the conviction that you can share it with, because you might, due to Chiron being in the total solar eclipse, feel unheard. That develops later on Monday, but you can see the moon. It's pretty close to Venus as well. So we've got a paradox, because Venus conjunct the moon in the 3rd house is brilliant for connecting with neighbours, those quick, fast conversations or text messages and emails. But that's the very area that as the moon moves on and the sun and connects to Chiron later in the day on Monday, that you could feel unheard over the next 6 months. Or it could bring up a sense of injustice if there was a sibling that wasn't very good to you, or someone that you lived around or encountered who was mean or spiteful, because Chiron can be about pain, but it also can be where we sparkle. And this is where it's vital to remember your elements. Your ruling element is air. And the third house energy, including the ruler of the third house, Mercury, in its retrograde, is suggesting the way you think, your beliefs, the third house, and your skill as a communicator is going to be crucial over the next half year. So this week is going to have some mixed blessings, but I feel there is something percolating here that's very, very important for you. Because let's look at the role of Mercury first thing on Monday. Yes, it's in its retrograde, but it's actually forging a perfect alliance to the part of fortune, which is the part of the chart that offers you a chance to express yourself, but it's in the 11th house. So something you believe in, the 11th house, something that inspires you, the 11th house, or a friend you have a connection with, the 11th house, despite Mercury's retrograde, can be lucky for you this week. Because Venus and the moon are so close together, don't underestimate the value of charm, but some frustration could build up later in the week. But the total solar eclipse embracing Chiron, the Aries energy, saying you must value your identity, but also don't underestimate the impact you have on others through your words or your ideas. Because as an Aquarian, you're often future forward orientated or very friendly, or you're connecting lots of different types of people. But you just may feel that you don't get that back so much from others, and that would be totally understandable. But see that this week, as I mentioned, does have mixed blessings. But that brings us to Wednesday, because by then Mars, the planet of passion, which has been giving you huge drive since the 23rd of March to improve your financial lot, but also demand more respect for what you offer, that comes into an exact conjunction with your traditional ruler of Saturn. Now Mars is known as the lesser malefic and Saturn the greater. So this is the clash of the malefics in traditional astrology. And for you, it occurs in house 2. If you don't feel totally whole about your self-worth, or you apply your financial situation to where you get your value from, that can be quite wounding. But also what Mars can do in the mix with Saturn, where Saturn has been very inhibiting over the last year in terms of your self-worth and money, Mars brings passion and an incredible determination to overcome challenges. But that can create a lot of tension. So if someone you're communicating with this week doesn't hear you, doesn't value you, they could be in for a rocket from you. But you know, even if you're someone who likes to get on well with people, that may be a really good thing. Because Jupiter and Uranus, your other ruler, your modern ruler, are coming into that exact alignment on the 21st. But from the 19th, Mars in your second house is connecting with them. So your emotional world is influenced by them or where you live, but the drive to get to where you want is going to be fabulous from now until then. So there's going to be a lot of talk amongst the astrology community about the total solar eclipse in Chiron. But for you, this chart has a lot of other strands which are very, very valuable. And by Thursday, as the retreat in Mercury meets the advancing Sun, and we have a cazimi, that gives you a chance to think even more crisply about something that's important to you. Maybe because of the Mercury retrograde, you will have to flex, see something differently, hear someone else's viewpoint as much as express yours. But I think by the end of this week, a lot more clarity is going to be in place, and your conviction is really going to be very strong. Whatever you're trying to achieve in your life, your determination to be heard, share your ideas, be creative over the next 6 months, but get a reward for it in terms of your worth, your value, or your bank balance is going to be absolutely incredible. It's been a real pleasure being with you, Aquarius. Have a great week. If you've yet to, please like, comment, share or subscribe. Welcome Pisces to your in-depth weekly forecast for week commencing the 8th of April for the Ascendant, the Sun or the Moon. On the screen now I'm showing the event chart right at the start of the week, which provides a backdrop for the whole 7 days. The big takeout is that your traditional ruler of Jupiter is inching closer to Uranus. That's going to become exact on the 21st, so that's really exciting. That's in your third house, which is to do with your ideas, the bubbly ideas you have, perhaps some innovative ideas. If you're interested in technology, that's a great link. But you do have that big pack of energy in house 2, which is to do with the good things in life, our appreciation of calorific goodies, but also it can be to do with money. And Venus moved into that area last week, and I'm hoping you've seen an uplift. Even though Mercury is in retrograde in this area, Mercury actually forges a brilliant link to the part of fortune, which is a critical degree in astrology where we can have some kind of break. So the second house, money, links to the 10th house, your connection to the world. So that's good, whether you're talking about something to do with business, a job application, a property matter, some kind of breakthrough despite the Mercury retrograde could happen because Venus moved into your second house and at the start of this week is very close to the Moon. So your appreciation of good foundations is strengthened by that. But also, if you recall, when Venus moved last week, it was applying in a sextile to Pluto in your 12th house. That's still in place as this week begins. Past efforts can pay off for you. If you've really devoted yourself, someone can let you know how much they appreciate you, maybe by a gift, a supportive and appreciative text, or it could be financial. Something that you've saved or grafted away for can come back to you. What's not to like? Well, just at the very start of the first house for you is the position of Mars. Mars moved into your sign on the 23rd of March and has given you a lot of encouragement to strut your stuff and showcase what makes you dynamic. But Saturn has been in this area for the last year and at times may have affected your vitality, or you've had to narrow your focus, otherwise Saturn has left you feeling a little bit burnt out. Now Mars connects with Saturn exactly on Wednesday, and that is the blockbuster aspect of all aspects. But of course later on Monday we have the total solar eclipse, and much as Mercury makes that great link with the part of fortune, the part of fortune makes a really tricky one with Neptune, your other ruler, in your first house. So if you are talking to someone about a business matter, it's essential that you get the details really nailed down. And of course with Mercury retrograde, if you have got something there that's a bit off or not quite exactly right, it could get highlighted. So do double check that information. But later on Monday, the Moon moves forwards, as does the Sun, connects with Chiron in your second house. Chiron in the sign of Aries is about identity, but Chiron in the second house is if we don't feel valued, because the second house can be about money, of course, but it can be about how we value ourselves, but it can also be about validation. Over the next 6 months, you're seeking greater validation, but you're also going to want to build up the foundations of your world, make it more stable and secure. But in order to achieve that outcome, you have to be true to yourself. And someone could try to prevent you or in some way inhibit your flow. And that's the aspect that you're really going to become aware of. Mars conjunct Saturn on Wednesday. In traditional astrology, these two are known as the greater and lesser malefics. Saturn the greater, Mars the lesser. In other words, they can bring misfortune. But I want to express to you that Mars in the first house is a good thing because it's the ruler of the sign of Aries, which is the first zodiac sign. So there's an echo of that. Essentially, if you have been feeling starved of energy or lacking a little bit of drive and motivation, you're going to get it this week. but you've got to really narrow your focus in order to gain the traction. And if someone puts demands in your way or resists the way you want to approach something, your individual needs, that could see you get extremely frustrated and exasperated. Mars in the sign of Pisces can also stir up a lot of hidden anger and resentments, which we are not so aware of. So in other words, our subconscious, our shadow side. So just be aware that if you do meet resistance this week, your response to it may be a little bit uncharacteristic. You may be quite forceful if you feel that someone's trying to block what you want to do, particularly around a financial matter. But overwhelmingly, as long as you value yourself, that total solar eclipse will give you a positive outcome, not necessarily just in 6 months' time, but over the next year, because you've got another solar eclipse coming on the 2nd of October in the outcome sector of your finances. So keep the faith, keep working hard, don't be deflected. Now there is going to be on Thursday a Mercury GEMINI. That's when the advancing Sun meets the retreating Mercury. Mercury in retrograde is known as an inferior conjunction. But this is the time for you to, as I mentioned before, really make sure that you're not dreamy, that you get the details right. And Neptune can cause you some mischief at times because it's difficult for you to get in the moment, because maybe your imagination is informing your reactions to situations, but you need to stay very earthy this week. Really stay rooted to reality. And you can overcome that, and by the end of this week, Mars dashes forwards and starts to connect to your traditional ruler of Jupiter. That will be exact by the 19th. It will also link up with Uranus as well from then. And all the hard work and inspiration you've been pouring into a situation over a very long time can come back to you in a significant way. And you're going to feel much more heard by the 3rd week of this month. But you still have to be aware that you could encounter some people who don't necessarily like you or appreciate you, but you must keep your sense of self-worth, your identity strong, because that's what's going to give you the reward later in the year. It's been a real pleasure being with you, Pisces. Thank you so much for joining me. Have a great week. If you've yet to do so, please like, comment, share, or subscribe.